All right. Welcome back. Picking up with part 2 of the midterm exam study guide for COM 103, looking at types of credibility. So prior credibility is what the speaker brings to the speech. So this is their reputation, their prior expertise. All right. Demonstrated credibility is credibility that comes in the speech itself. It's what they demonstrate during the actual speech. It's also known as intrinsic credibility. And then finally, terminal credibility is simply the balance between the two. So it's the balance between the speaker's prior reputation and their demonstrated expertise in the speech that they're giving. Okay, moving on to chapter 7, where we talked about research, different types of source materials. Okay, so books can be scholarly or trade books. Scholarly books are written by experts. Trade books are aimed at a general audience. Okay, when we talk about reference materials, we're talking about encyclopedias and dictionaries. When we talk about periodicals, we're talking about academic journals. Okay, specifically academic journals. When we talk about periodicals, news sources can be good source materials for research, particularly on research related to current issues and events. So newspapers, digital news sources like websites, social media, etc. And then finally interviews, which are actually considered primary sources. And this is where you're getting original content by actually talking to somebody who has knowledge related to your topic. Next, the book talked about what we call the MAP-IT technique for research. The main thing you need to know is what those three letters stand for. So M stands for the message, A stands for the author, P stands for the purpose. And then finally, know the two main formats of citing or work citations that I accept in this class, which are MLA and APA. And it would also be helpful to know what those stand for. So American Psychological Association, Modern Language Association. Moving on to chapter 8, which you did not have to take a quiz on, and we didn't have time to cover in class, but a couple things that are important, I think, to note, especially related to statistics. If you're using any statistics in your research, in your speech, understanding the difference between the mean and the median is important. The mean is the average of a group of numbers, okay? Probably the most common statistic used. The median is the middle number in a set of numbers in ranked order. So it's different than the average. It's simply you put the numbers in order and the one in the middle is the median. The mode is the most commonly appearing number in a set of numbers. And then finally the percentage. You guys I think know what a percentage is, but we define it as showing the relationship of a part to the whole. And obviously we use the number 100 to represent the whole. So 50% would be 50 out of 100, okay? And then finally, culturally accepted experts in Chapter 8. That's just talking about, for example, if I wanted to interview somebody, I would probably reach out to a culturally accepted expert on that topic. These include scholars, elected officials, other culturally accepted experts are, a lot of times might be like police officers or teachers or things like that, okay? Okay, moving on to chapter 9. Chapter 9 was all about organizing your speech, and it talked about the 6 traditional patterns of organization. So what are those? How are they defined? How do they differ from one another? Chronological is an organized or ordered sequence. So chronological pattern is first, second, third, etc. Okay. Works great for when you're talking about people, because you can go through kind of the timeline of their life in a chronological pattern. Spatial pattern is good for describing places. Spatial pattern moves from side to side, top to bottom, or around, okay? The causal pattern is the cause and effect. So it's all about what is causing and then what are the effects, okay? Problem solution examines a problem and then explains proposed solutions, all right? Very common setup pattern of organization for a persuasive speech. If you're doing a speech, informative speech on a current issue, the pro-con traditional pattern would be very useful, I think. Pro-con summarizes both sides of an issue, presents the pros and the cons of both of those sides, but it's not advocating for one side over the other. It's just presenting the information in an informative way. And then finally, topical. Topical is the most common pattern of organization. It's the one that most of my students use for most of their speeches. This is simply where you're organizing your main points into topics or sub-points or, main points that are used to explain your thesis. Each part contributes to the whole. Okay, moving on in chapter 9, signposts. These are really important. A lot of times signposts are just one or two words. Something like next, finally, so on and so forth. These are simply words that help you and your listener know where you're at in your speech and that you're moving forward. Transitions, same idea, but a little bit more detailed. They summarize where you've been and where you're going. So it's kind of like, now that I've explained this, I'm going to explain this. Okay, or now that we've looked at Leonardo da Vinci's contributions to the art world, we're going to move on and take a look at his contributions to science, or something like that, where you're making it clear what you just talked about and what you're getting ready to talk about. All right, moving forward to chapter 10. Chapter 10 is all about introductions and conclusions, and the introduction is really important because not only does it serve to gain the audience's attention, but it serves to kind of set up the speech, let people know where the speech is going. It includes your thesis, it includes a preview of your main points. So first things first, how do you gain attention? Well, there's numerous ways to do it, and I've got a list there on the study guide. So you could ask a question, but don't ask us, something like, who here has heard of Leonardo da Vinci? That's not a very interesting question. It's not really gaining attention. If you're going to ask a question, use a rhetorical question that ask listeners to answer in their own minds or to think a little deeper about a topic, okay? Vivid descriptions is another way to gain attention. So invite the audience to visualize something, imagine something, etc. If you're talking about a person, you're informing about a historical figure or something, using a quotation can be a really effective way to gain attention. If you're doing a speech on somebody like Martin Luther King, he's got so many well-known and super effective quotes throughout his career that you could use to gain attention and then tie into the rest of the speech. Startling numbers and statistics. If you're doing a speech on the Illinois budget crisis, statistics would be very useful there. You could relate topics to current events, and then obviously you can use humor to gain attention. Certain people are better at that than others. So 4 main purposes of the intro are to gain attention, to give the audience a reason to listen. So why is it important? Why should they pay attention? So this is all about connecting your topic to the audience in some way, right? Regardless of who you're talking about or what you're talking about or what your issue is, find a way to connect it to the audience. Establish your credibility. So why are you credible to talk about it? Well, in a demonstrative speech, if you're demonstrating how to throw a baseball and you've been playing baseball your whole life, well, that establishes credibility. But in something like an informative speech, you might not have a lot of background on your topic, but you could establish credibility simply by saying, I've been interested in this topic or this person for a long time, and now I've done a lot of research, and I'm going to inform you all of the things that I've learned. That at least establishes some credibility there in the intro. And then finally, you're going to preview the main points of your speech. The conclusion is also very important. The conclusion is where you wrap up the speech. It's where you kind of put a nice bow on the speech. And so our main things that we're trying to accomplish in the conclusion are, first, we want to make the transition to the conclusion clear. So make it clear to the audience that we're moving into the end. We want to review the main points of our speech. Provide closure. How do you do that? The best way is to somehow loop back to something you said in your intro. So let's say you used a interesting quote. Find a way to integrate that back into the conclusion to kind of bring it full circle. And then end memorably. Easier said than done, but use those same tips and techniques for the intro, statistics, quotes, humor, lots of ways that you can end on a memorable note. The main thing that I want you to get out of chapter 11 is just know the difference between the full sentence outline and the speaking outline, okay? So the full sentence outline is also known as the content outline. and it shows a speech's structural and logical elements. It's essentially your entire speech from start to finish, written out in full sentences, but in an outline format. Okay, it uses subordination, which indicates which information is more important or less important than others. Okay, so we use that outline format, typically Roman numerals first, then indent 1 and have a capital letter, indent again and a number, indent again and a lowercase letter, and that's for each chunk or section. And then you go back to the Roman numeral for the body, etc. And so that shows kind of the layers of importance and helps you to outline your ideas. Okay, so full sentence outline is the content outline. It's complete sentences. It's your whole speech. All right. Speaking outline is the outline you take to the podium. Generally, these are on note cards. There should be no complete sentences on your note cards. These are keywords and phrases. The idea is, it's what helps you keep your place. It's what helps you know what your main point is that you're going to talk about next. But it's not a script, and you're not reading from it. You're just using it as a guide. And then finally, last but not least, is chapter 15 on informative speaking. And the chapter talked about numerous different types of informative speeches. I want you to know 3 in particular: the descriptive, the report, and the expository. So a descriptive informative speech answers the question, what is it like? Okay, so it's describing things in detail and answering that question, what is it like? The audience should have a much better understanding of that by the end of the speech. The report type of informative speech is what most of you will probably be doing for your informative speech. The report, is where a speaker tells the audience what they've learned about a person or a subject, okay? And doing your research, that's essentially what you're going to be doing. You're going to be reporting what you learned and informing the audience while you're doing that. And then finally, the expository is also known as the speech to teach. It answers the question, what does it mean, or what is it? All right. Lots of times informative speeches will be kind of a combination of these. It will have some descriptive elements, maybe some expository elements, so on and so forth. And then last but not least is discourse consistency. And this just means using a repetitive style to help listeners identify and connect ideas throughout your speech. 2 main aspects to discourse consistency. One is repetition, which is saying the same thing more than once. Okay? Repetition is saying the same thing more than once. Redundancy, a bit different. It's repeating the same idea, but in different ways throughout the speech. So repetition, saying the same thing more than once. Redundancy, repeating the same idea in different ways. Okay? If you know those terms and concepts that are on your midterm exam study guide, and you know the definitions and what they mean that I just explained in these 2 parts of these videos, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to get an A on the midterm. All right, there will be no questions on information that was not covered on this study guide. So study. Hopefully you took notes while you watch these videos. You can always pause the video and write down notes and then keep going. But if you know what we just talked about and what's on your study guide, you should do just fine. All right. Obviously, if you have any questions, concerns, issues, you're always free to contact me. Best way is email. It's aporter@parkland.edu, or you can just email me through the class list on Cobra. All right, thank you. I'll see you guys all on Tuesday night. We will be taking the midterm first thing, and then we'll be jumping right into performing our informative speeches. Looking forward to it. See you then. Thanks.